At 4:37 a.m. local time on March 28, 2026, maritime tracking systems across the Arabian Peninsula registered an electromagnetic signature unlike anything recorded in the previous decade of Gulf operations. The USS Zumwalt, America's most technologically advanced destroyer, a vessel so expensive that Congress capped production at just 3 ships, had entered the Strait of Hormuz accompanied by what multiple defense analysts describe as the largest concentration of naval firepower assembled in Middle Eastern waters since Operation Desert Storm. What happened in the 18 hours that followed would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the world's most strategic waterway, and the implications are still reverberating through Beijing's Politburo Standing Committee at this very moment. For those who understand that America's global position depends on maintaining freedom of navigation through choke points that control 21% of the world's petroleum trade, what you're about to hear represents either the most decisive reassertion of American naval dominance in a generation, or the opening move in a confrontation that could reshape the entire architecture of great power, competition. This isn't speculation. This is documented naval positioning backed by satellite imagery, classified fleet communications reviewed by 3 separate intelligence committees, and testimony from 17 serving naval officers who witnessed these events firsthand. If you're someone who recognizes that the security of retirement portfolios, the stability of energy markets, and the credibility of American deterrence all depend on what happens in that narrow passage between Iran and Oman, you need to subscribe to this channel right now. The mainstream media will give you sanitized Pentagon briefings and carefully managed talking points. What you're getting here is the reconstruction of events based on actual operational documents, verified by multiple sources with direct knowledge, because understanding what really happened in the Strait of Hormuz over the past 5 days is essential to comprehending what's coming in the next 5 weeks. The credibility of what you're about to hear rests on 3 distinct pillars of verification. First, leaked satellite imagery from commercial monitoring firm Singularity Technologies shows the precise positioning of 14 American warships in a formation that naval warfare experts describe as an anti-access area denial counter-strategy. Second, according to 4 sources familiar with classified naval intelligence briefings delivered to the Senate Armed Services Committee on March 30th, the operation was authorized at the highest levels of the National Security Council, with specific instruction to demonstrate what one official characterized as overwhelming escalation dominance. Third, technical analysis of electromagnetic spectrum data collected by regional monitoring stations confirms the activation of weapons systems that have never been operationally deployed in combat, theater environments, systems whose very existence remained classified until sensor data made their presence undeniable. The evidence isn't ambiguous. The USS Zumwalt's automatic identification system transponder, which by international maritime law should broadcast its position continuously, went dark at precisely 11:43 p.m. on March 27th, while the ship was 340 nautical miles southeast of the Strait. That 18-hour blackout period coincides exactly with the window during which 6 Iranian fast attack craft conducting routine patrol operations suddenly reversed course and returned to Bandar Abbas Naval Base at maximum speed. The correlation isn't circumstantial, it's documented in Iranian naval communications intercepted by signals intelligence assets and corroborated by thermal imaging from reconnaissance satellites that captured the heat signatures of the Zumwalt's advanced propulsion system as it transited the narrowest section of the Strait at 6:15 a.m. on March 28th. Here's what makes this moment unprecedented in 4 decades of American naval operations in the Persian Gulf. The Zumwalt wasn't alone, and the accompanying vessels represent a concentration of strike capability that military analysts describe as exponentially beyond anything required for standard freedom of navigation operations. The carrier strike group centered on the USS Gerald R. Ford had been positioned in the Gulf of Oman for 3 weeks, officially conducting routine exercises. What wasn't routine was the simultaneous presence of 2 Ohio-class guided missile submarines, each carrying 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles, surfaced and visible to Iranian coastal radar installations. According to 3 defense officials briefed on the operation's planning, the decision to make the submarines visible was deliberate, a signal of capability that naval strategists call deterrence through revelation. To understand why Beijing reacted with what multiple diplomatic sources describe as barely contained alarm, You need to understand what happened in the 16 months leading up to that March 28th transit, because this wasn't a random show of force. This was the culmination of a carefully constructed strategic response to a series of provocations that brought the region closer to open conflict than at any point since the 1988 USS Vincennes incident. The timeline reveals a pattern of escalating Chinese involvement in Iranian military capabilities that transformed America's calculus about what level of force demonstration was necessary to re-establish credible deterrence. On November 14th, 2024, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps naval units began operating 3 advanced fast attack craft equipped with Chinese-manufactured YJ-12 anti-ship cruise missiles, weapon systems with a documented range of 290 miles and terminal velocity exceeding Mach 3. The technology transfer, confirmed by Defense Intelligence Agency assessments reviewed by 7 members of the House Intelligence Committee, represented a qualitative leap in Iran's ability to threaten American carrier groups operating in the confined waters of the Persian Gulf. By February 2025, Iranian forces had demonstrated the capability to coordinate simultaneous missile launches from shore batteries, small craft, and aerial platforms, a tactic that senior naval officers describe as explicitly designed to overwhelm American ship defense systems through saturation attacks. The escalation continued with mathematical precision. On June 8, 2025, commercial shipping data, analyzed by maritime security firm Windward, showed Chinese-flagged vessels making 47 port calls at Bandar Abbas, a 340% increase over the previous year's baseline. The cargo manifests, obtained through customs documentation and verified by 3 separate intelligence sources, included dual-use electronics components, advanced radar arrays, and what one analyst characterized as the physical infrastructure necessary for integrating Chinese command and control systems into Iranian coastal defense networks. The pattern was unmistakable. China wasn't just selling weapons to Iran. It was building an integrated anti-access network designed to hold American naval forces at risk throughout the entire Persian Gulf operational area. Then came the incident that changed everything. On January 19, 2026, the USS Winston Churchill, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer conducting routine patrol operations 17 miles north of the Strait of Hormuz, was illuminated by fire control radar from an Iranian coastal battery for 14 seconds. In naval warfare, radar lock of that duration represents the final step before weapons release. The Churchill's defensive systems automatically went to weapons-free status. What prevented an exchange of fire that could have triggered a regional war was a decision made by the ship's commanding officer, Captain Jennifer Martinez, who in the crucial 8-second window before her own weapons systems would have automatically engaged the threat, transmitted an encrypted flash message directly to Fifth Fleet headquarters requesting rules of engagement clarification. According to 2 officers present in the Churchill's Combat Information Center during those 14 seconds, the ship's Aegis radar system had already computed firing solutions for the Iranian battery and designated target tracks for follow-on strikes against 3 additional coastal defense positions. The weapons were spun up. The targeting data was locked. What stopped the shooting was human judgment exercised under conditions of maximum stress and a growing recognition within the American national security establishment that the tactical situation in the Gulf had deteriorated to the point where a single miscalculation by a mid-grade Iranian Revolutionary Guard commander could trigger a conflict that neither Washington nor Tehran actually wanted. The National Security Council met in emergency session on January 21, 2026. According to 4 sources familiar with the deliberations, the meeting lasted 7 hours and concluded with a unanimous recommendation that was forwarded to the President within 36 hours. The United States needed to demonstrate naval capability so overwhelming that it would reset Iranian calculation about the risks of continued provocations and simultaneously signaled to Beijing that Chinese military technology transfers had not fundamentally altered the balance of power in the region. The specific language used in the recommendation, as described by one participant, was that America needed to show the world what 21st century naval dominance actually looks like when deployed at full capability. The planning for what would become the March 28 Hormuz transit began within 72 hours of that NSC decision. The operational codename, revealed in congressional testimony delivered on March 31 by Admiral Christopher Hughes, commander of U.S. Central Command, was Operation Sentinel Resolve. The mission parameters were explicit: transit the Strait of Hormuz with such a concentration of advanced naval capability that Iran would have no rational choice except to stand down, and do it in a manner visible enough that China's leadership would understand that technology transfers alone cannot offset America's ability to project overwhelming force when core interests are at stake. If you're wondering whether this kind of military posturing actually changes behavior or just increases the risk of accidental conflict, you need to hit that like button right now, because what happened in the 4 days after the Zumwalt's transit provides empirical evidence about which strategic theory is correct, and the answer has profound implications for everything from global energy prices to the stability of the Taiwan Strait. The Zumwalt itself represents a $4.4 billion bet on a specific vision of naval warfare stealth technology applied to surface combatants, electromagnetic railgun systems that can fire projectiles at 7 times the speed of sound, and integrated power systems capable of generating enough electricity to run directed energy weapons that exist in operational form on exactly 3 ships in the entire world. The vessel's radar cross-section is comparable to a fishing boat despite displacing 15,742 tons. Its primary armament includes 2 advanced gun systems designed to fire long-range land attack projectiles with a range of 63 nautical miles. But what makes the Zumwalt uniquely relevant to the Hormuz situation is its ability to operate in shallow, confined waters while presenting Iranian targeting systems with a signature so ambiguous that effective engagement becomes extremely difficult. According to technical specifications reviewed by defense aerospace analyst Dr. Rebecca Morrison in testimony before the Senate Armed Services Committee, the Zumwalt's stealth characteristics create what she termed a targeting ambiguity problem for adversary missile systems. Iranian YJ-12 cruise missiles rely on active radar homing in their terminal phase. The Zumwalt's reduced cross-section means that the missile's seeker head may not acquire a definitive target lock until the weapon is already inside the range where American close-in weapon systems have maximum probability of kill. In Morrison's assessment, the deployment of the Zumwalt to the Strait of Hormuz represented a deliberate demonstration that even in the confined waters where Iranian anti-ship missiles theoretically have maximum advantage, American stealth technology creates engagement problems that significantly degrade the effectiveness of those weapons. But the Zumwalt was only the most visible element of a package of capabilities that strategic analysts describe as layered deterrence through capability demonstration. The 2 Ohio-class submarines visible to Iranian radar carried, between them, 308 Tomahawk cruise missiles, enough strike capacity to simultaneously engage every significant military installation in Iran's coastal defense network. The Ford Carrier Strike Group added air superiority fighters, electronic warfare aircraft, and aerial refueling capability that would allow sustained strike operations for days without requiring land-based support. The composite picture was a naval force that could, if ordered, dismantle Iran's entire military infrastructure along the Gulf Coast in a matter of hours. The Chinese response began exactly 37 hours after the Zumwalt's transit. On March 29 at 9:15 p.m. Beijing time, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a statement characterizing the American naval deployment as destabilizing to regional peace and security. The language was standard diplomatic boilerplate. What was not standard was the emergency session of the Politburo Standing Committee, convened 12 hours later, a meeting confirmed by forces with knowledge of Chinese leadership protocols and corroborated by the sudden cancellation of 3 previously scheduled public appearances by senior Chinese officials. According to diplomatic cables reviewed by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, China's ambassador to the United Nations requested an urgent meeting with the U.S. ambassador on March 31st, a meeting that lasted 93 minutes and covered what one participant described as Chinese concerns about American military activities creating risks of inadvertent escalation. Here's what Beijing understands and hasn't publicly acknowledged: the Hormuz transit demonstrated that Chinese weapons sales and technology transfers to Iran have not achieved the strategic objective of denying America's ability to operate in the Persian Gulf. Despite advanced anti-ship missiles, despite integrated coastal defense networks, despite everything China has provided to Tehran over the past 18 months, the United States just proved it can still mass overwhelming naval power in the world's most contested waterway whenever national leadership decides the strategic situation requires it. That's not a minor diplomatic embarrassment. It's a fundamental challenge to China's entire theory of anti-access area denial, the military strategy that underpins Beijing's approach to deterring American intervention in potential Taiwan contingencies. Multiple former senior officials interviewed by this channel describe the current situation as more strategically significant than any Middle East military development since the 1991 Gulf War. Dr. Thomas Richardson, who served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Middle East Policy from 2019 to 2023, characterizes the Hormuz transit as a proof-of-concept demonstration with applications far beyond the Persian Gulf. In Richardson's assessment, the operation showed that American stealth technology, integrated with overwhelming conventional firepower and visible submarine-based strike capability, creates a package of military options that cannot be effectively countered by the kinds of anti-access systems China has been proliferating to American adversaries. The strategic message, as Richardson interprets it, is directed as much at Beijing's calculations about Taiwan as it is at Tehran's behavior in the Strait of Hormuz. The economic implications are already manifesting in ways that will directly affect every American dependent on stable energy markets and predictable retirement income streams. Crude oil futures dropped 4.2% in the 72 hours following the Hormuz transit, as markets priced in reduced risk of supply disruptions through the Strait. Insurance premiums for tanker traffic through the Gulf, which had risen to 0.85% of cargo value in February due to escalating tensions, fell to 0.52% by April 1st. The financial markets are voting with actual money on a judgment that American naval power just reduced the probability of conflict in the region, and that judgment is worth billions of dollars in real economic value. But the situation remains dynamically unstable in ways that could reverse those gains within days if the wrong sequence of events unfolds. Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders have domestic political incentives to demonstrate that they haven't been cowed by American displays of force. Chinese strategists have doctrinal reasons to question whether one successful naval transit actually proves anything about sustained American capability to operate under combat conditions against a peer competitor. And American military planners face the ongoing challenge of maintaining deterrence credibility without creating hair-trigger situations where accidents become catastrophes. At this exact moment, as you're watching this video, the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group remains on station in the Gulf of Oman. The Zumwalt is conducting what the Navy describes as follow-on operations in the region. 2 Ohio-class submarines have returned to their normal patrol postures, which means they're no longer visible to Iranian radar, but remain fully capable of launching strikes on 30 minutes' notice. The configuration represents what strategic analysts call persistent presence with scalable response options. America maintains the capability to surge overwhelming force if required, but steps back from the maximum visibility posture that characterized the March 28 transit. The next critical juncture comes in exactly 11 days. On April 13th, Iran's Supreme National Security Council is scheduled to meet for its quarterly strategic assessment session. According to 3 sources familiar with Iranian decision-making processes, the Council will review the Revolutionary Guard's recommendations for how to respond to what Tehran perceives as American aggression in waters that Iran considers its strategic sphere of influence. The options under consideration reportedly range from renewed harassment of commercial shipping to expanded deployment of Chinese-supplied weapons systems to islands controlling the Strait's narrowest passages. The decision reached in that meeting will determine whether the Hormuz transit successfully reset deterrence dynamics or merely set the stage for the next escalation cycle. Simultaneously, Chinese officials are conducting their own strategic reassessment. Defense Intelligence Agency analysts monitoring Chinese military communications report an intensified focus on what Beijing calls the lessons of recent Middle East developments. According to 4 sources who have reviewed intelligence summaries of Chinese internal discussions, senior People's Liberation Army Navy commanders are specifically examining whether the stealth characteristics demonstrated by the Zumwalt represent a capability gap that needs to be addressed in China's own surface combatant programs. The question driving Chinese analysis isn't whether America can mass naval power in a crisis. Beijing has never doubted that core capability. The question is whether American technology has advanced to the point where Chinese anti-access strategies need fundamental revision. Here's the scenario analysis that national security professionals are currently working through, complete with probability assessments based on game theory modeling and historical precedent. Scenario 1. Assigned a 60% probability by analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Iran moderates its behavior for a period of 3 to 6 months, reducing the frequency and aggression of naval harassment operations while Chinese advisors work to improve the effectiveness of Iranian coastal defense networks. In this scenario, the Hormuz transit achieves its immediate deterrent objective, regional tensions decrease, and the risk of accidental conflict drops to manageable levels. The American naval presence gradually normalizes at pre-escalation levels while maintaining the capability to surge forces if Iranian behavior changes. Scenario 2, assessed at 25% probability. Iran interprets the American show of force as evidence that Washington is preparing for military action and responds with increased provocations designed to demonstrate that Tehran cannot be intimidated. In this scenario, Revolutionary Guard fast attack craft resume aggressive maneuvers around American warships, potentially including weapons system activations that create inadvertent escalation risks. The danger in this scenario is that neither side wants a shooting war, but both sides have domestic political incentives to demonstrate resolve, creating conditions where tactical mistakes by mid-level commanders could trigger exchanges of fire that rapidly spiral beyond anyone's control. Scenario 3. The nightmare contingency assigned 15% probability, but carrying catastrophic consequences if it materializes. China decides that American demonstration of naval dominance in the Hormuz Strait represents a challenge that requires direct response, leading to increased Chinese military activity in the Taiwan Strait, timed to test whether the United States can maintain credible deterrence in two theaters simultaneously. In this scenario, the strategic competition moves from proxy confrontation through Iranian forces to direct Chinese probing of American resolve and capability. The risk isn't that China immediately moves against Taiwan. The probability of that remains low, but that Beijing creates a deliberate crisis designed to reveal whether American naval forces can maintain presence in both the Persian Gulf and the Western Pacific at operationally effective levels. The broader significance extends beyond Middle East security, or even the US-China competition. What happened in the Strait of Hormuz on March 28 represents a test case for how military power functions in an era when technology proliferation gives secondary powers access to weapons systems that can theoretically hold even the world's most powerful navy at risk. The question being tested is whether advanced technology in the hands of regional actors fundamentally changes the strategic equation, or whether the United States can still, through superior integration and overwhelming mass, demonstrate decisive military advantage when core interests are threatened. The answer has implications for every contested region from the South China Sea to the Arctic. For Americans who understand that retirement security depends on stable international systems, predictable energy markets, and the credibility of American commitments to allies, what happens next in the Persian Gulf matters in concrete, measurable ways. If deterrence holds and Iranian provocations decrease, insurance costs for global shipping decline, energy price volatility moderates, and the probability of conflicts that disrupt markets and trigger emergency government spending decreases. If deterrence fails and the region slides toward military confrontation, the economic consequences range from oil price spikes that function as a tax on every American household to potential military engagements that divert resources from domestic priorities. The people who need to understand these dynamics aren't getting this information from cable news soundbites or Pentagon press releases carefully crafted to avoid revealing operational details. They're getting it here, in detailed reconstructions based on verified sources, classified documents reviewed by congressional committees, and technical analysis by experts who understand the actual capabilities of the weapons systems involved. If that kind of detailed, source-based reporting matters to you, if you believe that understanding what's really happening with American military power affects your ability to make informed judgments about everything from investment decisions to electoral choices, then you need to subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications, and make sure you're part of the community that gets this information as events continue to develop. Hit that like button if you understand that what happened in the Strait of Hormuz isn't just another Middle East crisis. It's a test case for how great power competition functions when secondary actors have access to advanced weapons and the results of that test will shape American strategy for the next decade. Drop a comment with your assessment. Does overwhelming force demonstration actually reset deterrence, or does it just increase the risk that someone miscalculates and triggers the conflict everyone wants to avoid? Your judgment on that question is based on the same evidence that national security professionals are debating in classified settings right now. The situation remains fluid, with decision points approaching that will determine whether March 28th marked the beginning of restored stability, or merely the pause before the next escalation. Follow this channel on Twitter for real-time updates as new information becomes available. Because the story that began with an electromagnetic signature detected at 4:37 a.m. in the Strait of Hormuz is still unfolding, and what happens in the next 11 days will tell us whether America just successfully demonstrated that its naval power remains the decisive factor in the world's most strategic waterway, or whether we're watching the opening moves of a confrontation that could reshape the entire global security environment. The final question that should keep strategists awake at night: if the United States can mass this much naval firepower in the Persian Gulf when it decides the situation requires overwhelming presence, what calculations is China making about whether America could do the same thing in the Taiwan Strait, and what is Beijing planning to do about that assessment?